Hey everyone! So, I know I haven't mentioned it on this channel before, but the MCU is my absolute favorite movie and now show franchise of all time. I'm a sucker for superheroes, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe is by and large the cream of the crop in that area, in my opinion. Some of you may have heard that the first major show in the MCU just released its final episode about a week ago. It's a small little mini-series called WandaVision. That was sarcasm, by the way. There's been like a million advertisements since it started airing. But anyways, as a forewarning, before this video really starts, this is going to be a little bit of a longer review due to how much I love and enjoy the MCU, and also the fact that it's a show, which means there's a lot more content and a lot more to talk about than there would be in a movie. If you've seen the show, please be sure to put your thoughts in the comments. I'm always interested to see what others think of series, but please do try to keep it spoiler-free, as that's what the majority of this review will be. WandaVision is a mini-series that's set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that's directed by Matt Shakman, and it stars Elizabeth Olsen, Paul Bettany, Kathryn Hahn, and Teyonah Parris, among others. Blending the style of classic sitcoms with the MCU, Wanda Maximoff and Vision are two superpowered beings who are living their ideal suburban lives when they begin to suspect that not everything is as it seems. Alright, keep in mind in this review that I will try to keep it spoiler-free for the majority of the video. However, towards the end, I will cover a little bit more spoilery things, but I will give a warning before that starts so that you can, click away or skip to the section after that. Anyways, let's get into WandaVision. All right, the first thing we're going to do is get into the good aspects of the show. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is how well that it really captured the feelings from all the decades that it covered. If you've seen the show or any of the trailers, you'll know that each episode plays out like a sitcom from a different decade. So in the first episode, it starts with the 50s, and then it goes all the way to the 2000s. Every decade has jokes and situations that feel like they fit really well into their particular setting. Now, even if they wouldn't be something that I would normally laugh at, like I would never really just watch the Dick Van Dyke Show just for fun and really laugh at it, I still found that the episodes made me smile and chuckle because I understood that they fit into this decade of sitcoms. Also, the design and look of each episode changes throughout, and it legitimately felt like I was watching a show from the 60s or the 70s or the 90s, just with starring characters from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's also commercials within each of these decade-themed episodes that feel as if they are from that era. While also containing clever little Easter eggs for the Marvel comics / other movies that have been in the MCU. Everything about this aspect of WandaVision is really on point. Another great thing about this show were the performances. Now, of course, you have to mention Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen, who are fantastic, returning in their roles as Vision and Wanda, respectively. In the past MCU's movies that they were in, they were good, but their characters weren't given a lot to do, and so it didn't get to show off their acting chops in their roles, especially Paul Bettany, because they were never the main characters. However, they take front and center in this show, and they do a fantastic job doing so. They also have a really great chemistry with each other, which is actually something that happens quite often with pretty much all of the characters in this show. So they're able to play off each other in ways that make the comic moments appropriately comedic and make the dramatic moments carry the weight that they're supposed to. The actors for the side characters also do a really great job in their performances. Teyonah Parris played a character that provided some much-needed sympathy and conscientiousness as the show moved along with the character that she played when it was needed. It was also really lovely to see Randall Park and Kat Dennings return in their previous roles as Jimmy Woo and Darcy Lewis, and they provided some really fantastic comic relief, always made me chuckle when they were on the screen. I did take issue with just a few select sequences that these side characters were in. They felt over the top, like the things that they were saying, or the things that they did, and over the top in a bad way, but I think most of that had to do with the writing than the performances. So overall, that was really good with those side characters. Another thing that I thought was really good about the show was that it was much more thematically focused than most of the other MCU projects. There were a lot of themes in this show about grief and depression and how to cope with loss that we've certainly seen in Marvel projects before, but they've never had as much of a spotlight on them as they do in this show. Now, I think a lot of that is due to the fact that the show lends itself to this exploration more than a movie because it has a little bit more time to flesh out characters and themes while still moving the plot forward. A movie is also more condensed and has to do a much stricter and tighter balancing act than a show does. The next positive is a minor one, but it's still worth mentioning nonetheless, is that the show gave us a little bit more context as to who Wanda and Vision are and where they came from. The show recontextualizes Wanda's powers and explains her and Vision's origins a little bit more than the MCU has in the past. And that all goes a long way in making the audience really care about these characters. The final positive aspect about the show, and quite possibly the best thing about the show, is the mystery that's at its center. Now, if you've seen any of the trailers or any sort of promotional things for the show, you can tell that there are some weird things going on within the story. There is a big mystery that's built up for about the first 3 episodes. There's all sorts of really weird moments and things that happen that can be at times actually really unsettling. Because of the fact that, you're in the sitcom world and it's really light and funny, and then something really weird happens. You're like, oh, okay, didn't know where that's coming from. So there's a semi-major reveal where you find out what's going on around the middle of the series, but that doesn't mean the show lets up in its intrigue. It almost introduces a brand new mystery entirely within all the strange things that are already going on. All of this keeps the show really captivating, and it has a lot of twists and turns throughout, and it all feels like it makes sense within the world and the story. So after that, unfortunately, we have to get into the bad aspects. And one of the biggest ones that I found was, I thought personally there was a lot of issues with pacing. Now, I'm going to talk about this without giving anything away, but this is a difficult part to discuss at length while avoiding spoilers, so just keep that in mind. So throughout the show, there's 2 major stories that kind of happen simultaneously. And they each deal with different conflicts, but also at times they coincide with one another. So there were a lot of times where it would switch to one of those stories, and I would always feel like, ooh, that seems like too soon or too early or too late to switch. Like, it would have been better timed if it happened just a couple minutes earlier. Or I would feel like, wow, that cut between stories seems really abrupt and awkward. It didn't feel like everything was finished that needed to be finished before they cut back. And I get that, like, you have to do that because you want to build up a little bit of tension and have some intrigue, and the audience is kind of wondering, oh, what's going to go on with that when we get back to it. But it wasn't like smooth. It never felt like they could find the sweet spot when they balanced these 2 stories, except for possibly in the last episode. It got a little bit better. The next bad aspect, another thing that wasn't super great about this show, was how it handled the motivations and actions of a main antagonist. Now, I won't say who is or what their role is, but this character at first seemed like their actions made sense, and it kind of seemed like they had really good reasons for doing the things that they did. However, in one of the later episodes, there's a reveal that really makes the audience see this character completely different in all the things that they've done in the past. And it kind of makes you think, oh, well, now a lot of the things that they've done don't make sense anymore. Like, why wouldn't they have gone about the things that they need to do in a completely different and more logical and less dangerous way? So it feels like then they just made them do certain things so that they could have them be an antagonist. And that was kind of annoying. The last bad aspect of the show was how it ended up dealing with some consequences towards the end. There's a character who does some things that are really, really wrong, and it involves a lot of other people. However, it feels like the show wants the audience to think, oh, well, this character was distraught and was having a hard time coping with some things, so the things that they did don't really matter as much. But when you think about it, the things that they did have extreme implications for lives other than their own. It's a huge thing that really deserved some sort of punishment or consequence. And it was frustrating that there wasn't even any, like, there wasn't something that was addressed by anyone. So that was frustrating to see. Okay, so before I get to my closing overall thoughts, this section of the video, I'm going to address some things that I didn't think could be talked about without going into spoiler territory. So if you've seen the show all the way through, go ahead and watch this part, please. But if you haven't, skip to the end. You should be able to see where the words closing thoughts pop up. I'll be finished talking about spoilers, and you can see my final thoughts on the show as a whole. All right, so you've been warned. So the spoilers are coming in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the main thing I wanted to talk about in this section is fan theories and what the show helped me to realize about the MCU. So a lot of complaints about the show come from how many people were disappointed about fan theories. If you watched it from week to week, as much as I did, you know that a lot of fan theories would come up from episode to episode, thinking about like what this character did, what it's going to mean for the next episode, all sorts of things. And a lot of it tied into things like Mephisto or Doctor Strange or the X-Men. And the fact that so many people had issues with this, like would say bad things about the show because of this, actually was really bothersome to me. For a while, I too was caught up in the fun of fan theories. But I realized something about halfway through the show that I wish more people would have realized. Doing all of this theorizing and looking up characters and how certain story beats could possibly hint at other story beats from the comics showing up in the show was taking away from the story that was actually being presented on screen. So while fan theories are a lot of fun, don't get me wrong on that, it's really frustrating when people get upset that they don't come true. Like, just because it was theorized and you got yourself excited for it doesn't mean that you can hold it against the show and when it doesn't happen. Like, that's on you. And that doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the show. And I also think it takes away a little bit from what the MCU has been all about that I kind of lost track of, but realized as I was watching through kind of the later episodes, which is it's about telling these characters' stories and making them personal and something that the audience can care about and connect with. Like, it's fun when you do, big fan service moments, but that's not really what gives it its heart and what has kept it going in the, cultural consciousness for, 10, 13, 15 or so years. Maybe a little bit less. So it frustrates me when people get upset about the fact that, Agatha wasn't shown working for Mephisto, or Senior Scratchy wasn't Mephisto, or that White Vision wasn't Ultron reincarnated. One thing that I will give a little bit of, that I can understand a little bit more is that Pietro not actually being the Quicksilver from Fox's universe, or any Quicksilver really for that matter. All of it being a setup for a boner joke, and that was it. I understood that a little bit more because the tease at the end of episode 5, I think it was when he first entered, was based on solid information that fans already had about these movies. That they knew that he was the Quicksilver from the Fox universe, and they also knew that there's a Doctor Strange movie coming up with the word multiverse in the title. But at the end of it, I thought it was clever for Marvel to find that as a way to kind of stick it to all of the over theorizers. So here are my closing thoughts on the show as a whole. Overall, WandaVision is a really bold entry into the TV show realm for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's an entry that is mostly really good. It kicks off Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a really compelling way, tells one story as a whole and gets it wrapped up by the end, and it also leaves you looking forward to the other projects that are coming in the future. It does a really great job recreating all the decades of sitcoms, has a great cast giving great performances, and its themes and mysterious tone were handled really nicely throughout. Unfortunately, it was held back a little bit by an antagonist that was not well done, and it had some issues all throughout the show with pacing and the consequences at the end. But all of that wasn't really too bad, in light of the whole thing. First score, I'd give it a 90%, and I would recommend it to any and all fans of the MCU. It was really good, but I would recommend it to those fans and only to those fans who have seen up to this point in the MCU. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate all of you. This has been a legit review of WandaVision.